Do you want to learn how I take professional looking photos like this? Like this? Then stick around and I will show you how. Hey guys, welcome to another video, and in this video I'm going to share with you, I guess is probably the best way of putting it, because I don't want to say I'm going to teach you because I'm by no means an expert. In kind of like my past sort of last few years, although not so much in the last probably couple of years, I taught myself photography, and I probably did that for about 3 or 4 years doing photo shoots, portrait photo shoots with, well, people and animals. But also I ventured into doing weddings as well. Not done that as much in the last couple of years, mainly because I've got a full-time job and the photography started to become a bit of another full-time job, so I didn't really want to maintain 2 full-time jobs. But because I've got the equipment from doing photography a few years ago, I thought I may as well dig that equipment out and start using it to take professional looking photos of my Lego models. So what I want to do today is kind of share with you how I do that. At the moment I'm filming on my phone, because if you just swing around here you'll see I've got my camera set up all ready to go. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that you don't necessarily need an expensive camera to take good photos. Really what it's all about is lighting and your kind of like backdrop that you use, and I'll go a little bit into that in terms of what lighting equipment I use, how I use it, how I position it, and also the backdrop that I use. I'll also leave a link in the description below to all of the equipment that I use. Most of it, oh, I don't know where that came from. Most of it is relatively cheap. Probably the most expensive thing that I've got is probably the camera, but then second to the camera is probably the tripod. But you don't need to necessarily purchase a really expensive tripod. And as I said earlier, you can definitely use your phone to take photos, and I'll show you how easy it is to do that as well with my phone that I'm using at the moment for filming on, rather than using the more expensive camera. Although these days I think phones are probably as expensive as cameras. Anyway, well, not. I'll show you the difference just to show that you can use a phone rather than using a camera. So I've got 2 kind of setups that I use. I've got a setup which is set up at the moment on my left here, which is how I sort of photograph the smaller models. But as you'll see when we get into this setup is no good really for larger models. So I've got a different setup I use, and I will switch round to that to show you how I photograph the larger models. I'll also go a little bit into settings on the camera. I'm not going to go in too deep because I kind of want this video to be aimed at somebody who is not necessarily really technical about how to use a camera. I'm going to be using the automatic settings that the camera comes with. I'm just going to explain in terms of some of the settings that I use to kind of get the effect that I want, and I'll explain a little bit about that when we get into it. I'll also show you the lighting equipment that I've got. I've already mentioned that, so apologies for that. And really, yeah, I'm just using my Lego room. I've not got, I mean, this room actually is meant to originally started life out as a photo studio, but gradually over time it's become a bit more of a man cave kind of stroke Lego room. But I'm utilising the desk, the build desk that I build on, as you can see there. And also I utilise that desk as well when I'm photographing the larger models. So I'm going to get into it. I'm just going to switch over to the front camera now, and I'm going to show you how I photograph these models. If you've got any questions about what you see, about any techniques that I use, about any of the equipment that I use, please feel free to drop them below, and I will obviously answer the best I can. Also, before I get into it, always have to do this, please make sure you hit that subscribe button, and also make sure you hit that bell button at the side of the subscribe button to make sure you get a notification when I release any new videos. And also, you know, drop a like and drop a comment just generally anyway. So right, let's get into it. Okay then guys, so as you can see, I've got it set up to take a picture of the 40th anniversary train model that came out earlier this year. And I'm using a Canon EOS M50 camera at the moment to take this. I've got that mounted on a Manfrotto tripod. And in terms of the lighting, I've got three lights really, 2 of one type and 1 of the other. I've got my ring light on top, which as you can see Gives it a little bit of light coming in at the top there. That's the ring light that I use when I'm doing the filming as well, but in this case I wanted it to kind of like, you know, cast light down onto top of the subject. And then I'm also using 2 studio lights. And at the moment I don't have the diffuser cover over them because I don't need to because of the light box. And then that's the other one. And they're basically mounted on basic tripods as well, as you can see there. And then in terms of the light box itself, this is just a collapsible light box. It's made from material. It's quite flimsy actually. And it kind of like just concertinas up into a little bag. In fact, I'll show you the bag. This is the bag it comes in. And as you can see, just pop it on there. So the bag is a lot smaller than the light box. So yeah, it's designed to sort of fold up and go inside that. Now this particular light box, what I'll do is I'll pop it on this chair here. If just give me a minute, I'm just going to open it up. Yeah, so this particular light box came with 4 backgrounds, I think it is. Yeah, 4 different colour backgrounds. A white, a red, a black, and I think there's a blue in there, yeah, and the blue. But one thing I found, if I just take the white one out, is that because these are material, and as you can see, if I just open this out and just pan back a bit, it's got creases in. And I mean, this one I've tried to iron, it's been folded up since, but these backdrops don't really make for a good photography because you can actually pick up the creases in the film. So I don't use those, and what I do use is what they call photographic backdrop paper. And what I've done is I've cut some down, and as you can see, I've velcroed that inside the light box. So if we just pop down there and show you at the top. So it's just basically a piece of paper, and what I can do is just swing around and show you the roll I've taken it off. So this is the roll of paper that I've taken it off, as you can see. It's quite a large roll. This is what I used to use for doing the portrait photos, and it's also what I use to do the larger models, for photographing of the larger models. But we'll come back to that in a bit. So yeah, all I've done is taken it off, cut a piece down, stuck 4 pieces of Velcro on it, and then just folded it up, sort of curved it up inside the light box. And it does actually make for a smoother backdrop, as you'll see when I start taking the photographs. So that's a little bit about the equipment that I've got set up. As I say, most of it's relatively cheap. I mean, you can get studio light equipment that's into thousands, but these I think were less than £100. The ring light was definitely less than 50. The Manfrotto tripod, I think that was about 150, so that's quite expensive, but you can pick up a camera tripod for probably less than 50 quid. And then obviously the camera itself, that was probably I think about £700, but I bought that obviously for filming YouTube videos as well, not just doing the photography. So yeah, so that's a bit about the equipment. The photo paper, the backdrop paper that I just mentioned earlier, I'll show you that when I actually roll that out. That's not that cheap. I think that's about £50 per roll. Or it might have even been a little bit more than that, but you do get quite a lot of use out of it. Quite a lot of it on the roll. I think 20 meters, I think something like that on a roll, and I think it's something like 2.4 meters wide in general. But as I say, we'll speak more about that when we come to start photographing the large models. So what I'm going to do now, guys, is I'm going to start doing some photographs of the train. I'll show you a little bit about the camera in terms of the settings. From there, we'll then go to looking at photographing larger models. Right then, guys, so I've got the camera turned on. And the first thing to tell you really is, the first setting that you really need to consider is on the dial on the top, and most cameras have these, most SLR cameras have these, is that you need to have it in aperture priority, which generally on most cameras it's the AV setting. Now what that does is it allows you to control how open the aperture is, which then obviously affects the depth of field. The reason you put it on this is because you don't want to make the depth of field that shallow that you get the front of the model in focus but the back of the model is blurred out. I mean, you can do that if you want to get that effect, but what I find is I'd like to get the whole model in focus if possible. So that's tip number 1, you want it on aperture priority setting. Now, in terms of what you want to set it at, so at the moment, as you can see, I have got this at f13. There's usually a dial on the camera which will allow you to change that. Now, the lower the number, the shallower the depth of field. So what I can do is, if I turn this round, And then I'm going to focus on the front of the train. And then what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to take this picture, and you will see that the train drive at the back is slightly out of focus. Now that's because of the shallow depth of field. What it's done is it's focused on the 40 sign at the front, and as the depth of field has gone more shallow at the back, it's then made that blur out a little bit. But obviously I don't want that. I want the whole thing to be in focus. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dial that F number up to about maybe F13. Don't want to go too much, because as you close the aperture up, you're letting less light into the camera, and therefore your picture is going to be darker. So you don't really want to be doing that. So a good number is probably around about F11, probably F9 at a push. You might be able to, if you're doing a smallish model, but if the model's got quite a bit of depth, you might want to dial it up to about F13. But in this case, I want to dial it up to F13, so I basically get all of the train in focus. Now what I'm going to do is, rather than focus on the 40 as well, what I want to do is I want to focus kind of around in the middle of the train. So I'm going to focus about there, because I want the whole image to be in focus. Yeah. And I'm going to take that picture. And now you will see the difference between the previous picture and the current picture. Now when you're taking a photograph of something side on like that, probably doesn't matter as much. Your depth of field probably doesn't matter as much. So if I take that picture, and you can see there, because it's I've turned the model around, and you've basically got not much depth in the model in the position it is. You don't have to worry about the depth of field getting shallow towards the back. And that's it basically. Now, I wouldn't tinker around with anything else with the camera. It just really wouldn't be worth it. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to my phone, and I can just show you how you can achieve the same results using a mobile phone as opposed to using a DSLR. Right then guys, so I've now switched it over and I'm now filming with my camera, and as you can see I've got my mobile phone set up. Now the tripod that I'm using, it's what they call a tripod selfie stick, and it's relatively cheap. I think I paid less than £20 for that, but it does double up as a tripod as well. And as you can see, if I just zoom in onto the camera, one thing about the mobile phone is you can use the digital zoom on it, but what I'd recommend is you don't use the digital zoom, because that can get quite pixelated, and just crop in when you're doing the editing afterwards. Now in terms of the lighting, it's exactly the same. I've got the ring light on top, as you can see, and I've got the studio lights, as you can see, both sides. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a picture, and then you'll see that it actually, oops, I'm going to just click on the train to make sure it's focused on that train, and then you can just see my finger, I'm going to take the photo. And you can get very similar results. And obviously I've had to crop in to you know, make sure you don't see the white of the light box. But as you can see, comparing to one I took with the camera versus one I took with the mobile phone, there's not a lot of difference. And actually, some of the apps that you can get on a mobile phone allow you to manipulate the image afterwards to kind of enhance it a little bit. One thing I forgot to mention when I'm taking photographs on my camera, I have my camera set to RAW mode. Now basically that allows you to do a lot of post-shoot editing rather than trying to let the camera do it when it's converting it to a JPEG. On my phone at the moment I've just got it set to normal photo mode, which will just take a normal JPEG picture, and it's done all the editing. But what you can do, most of the modern mobile phones these days do have a Pro mode. And if I just click over onto here and click on Pro, and in that Pro mode you can see you get a lot more settings. So you can change the aperture size, you can change the ISO settings, you can change where the autofocus, how the autofocus works. That just gives you a little bit more flexibility in terms of if you want to capture the image in a RAW format and do all the processing post-shoot. Right then guys, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to show you how I photograph larger models. Right then guys, so as you can see I've got it all set up now to photograph larger models. So you'll see I've now rolled down the large paper backdrop, and to be honest, you can get really expensive roller mechanisms which kind of work on a ratchet, so that allow you to lower the paper very gently. Now I've kind of gone a cheap option really. As you'll see, I've just basically used curtain brackets. either side. So you'll see over there and over there. And I've just put a long pole, and it, you know, it does the job. What I have to do, oops, tripping over the light, is use a bulldog clip there, which just holds the paper in place, otherwise it'll just keep rolling and rolling. And then all I've done is I've rolled it down onto the table, as you can see there, and I've had to use bulldog clips either side to clip it to the table. So, you know, it might not look very pretty, but it does the job. And if I just sort of step back a little bit, you'll see I'm not using my ring light anymore, because I don't need to, because I've got my studio lights kind of raised up and angled down, and that gives me enough light. And also I forgot to mention earlier as well, I don't use a flashlight either. The problem with using a flashlight, especially if you're using front flash that's built into the camera, is you do get a kind of reflective flash back coming off the model, because obviously Lego's shiny and plastic and it gives a bit of it's got a reflective surface. So I tend to not use the flash. You could use a flash kind of off center if you really wanted, but I've kind of find that using the two studio lights just gives me enough light, and I can always, because I shoot the picture in RAW format, I can always tweak the shadows and the highlights in post-shoot edit. So I'm going to turn the camera on, because it's gone off. And I'm just going to take a picture of this, and you'll see, obviously this is the Assembly Square model, and it's considerably larger than the train. So I've got the camera mounted on the tripod again. I've got it set back a little bit, but I've also got the aperture still set at f13. Because you're dealing with a bit more distance here, it's probably more important to have the aperture dialed up so you don't get that shallow depth of field, especially if you're wanting to take kind of like corner on pictures, which I'll show you in a minute. If you dialed it right back down to like f4.5, which obviously opens the aperture really wide, you'll end up with the front of it being in focus but the back being blurred. Now you might, as I say earlier, you might want to go for that effect. Me personally, I don't like that effect. So I'm going to take this picture and you'll see how that turns out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and turn the model K to corner, and then show you the difference between having a lower F number to a higher F number, just so you can see the difference in that. So just give me 2 seconds while I just turn it around. Right then guys, so I've turned the model around K to corner now, and what I've done is, as you can see there, I've focused on this corner here. I've dialed the F number down right down to 4.0, so this is the widest it will go for this camera and this lens. And I'm going to take this photograph, and you'll see in the photograph that the back corner will start to blur out a little bit. And you can see from looking at that picture, the model towards the back is looking a little bit blurred. Now if I just dial that F number back up to F13, and I don't think you need to go any higher than F13. As I say, if I wrap that right up to like F25, you'll see the picture starts to go a little bit darker. So I start to lose a little bit of the detail in the shadows. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to dial it back to F13. As I say, you can get that out in post-shoot edit, but it's always better to try and get your highlights and your shadows in camera the best you can get it, so you're not having to work with that too much after the shoot in the post-shoot edit. So what I'm going to do is now take a photograph. So I'm still focused on that corner, but now I'm taking it at F13, as you can see there, and you'll see the difference in the two pictures. Now what I can do, if I'm still getting a little bit of blurring out towards the back, I can change my focus picture to something that's a little bit sort of in the middle. And they always say, if you read the photo magazines, that if you're trying to get something fully in focus from back to front, is always try to focus on a third to a half in terms of the model, and you will get the foreground and the background in focus. So I'm now going to take that picture, and you'll see hopefully the difference in the two. Okay, guys, so that is it really. I hope you found this video useful. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to switch it around to the front camera so you can see me and see what I'm talking about. So there you have it, guys. I hope you've found this video useful. Tried not to go into too much technical depth because I kind of wanted this to be aimed at kind of average Joe, I guess. You know, somebody who's probably not got the high-end equipment, probably somebody who's not got the experience. As I said right at the beginning of the video, I'm nowhere near a totally experienced photographer. What I know is what I've learned through reading magazines, but it's kept me in good stead in terms of being able to, you know, to take photographs of these models. If there's any questions, I think I might have said this also in the video, but if there's any questions you want to ask, then please, you know, feel free to leave a comment below and I will try to answer those questions the best I can. Anyway, guys, I'm going to sign off now. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. My right arm is aching because I'm actually doing this selfie style. I've got a selfie stick, but it's behind the roll of paper and I don't really want to be messing around and trying to get that, you know, risking the ripping the paper. So I'm waffling now. So I'm going to get off now, guys. See you later.